Live. Hello everybody, welcome to Live in the Wellness Garden. It is I, Andreas, your garden coordinator, and today we have both Anelli and Daniela. They are going to be helping with the maintenance of our hydroponic and aquaponic system. So we have 2 hydroponic systems, well 3 really, and 1 aquaponic system. So before we get started with that, let's just take a little tour around. Really pleased with this bed right here. This one looks amazing, and these beans are almost done, and you know, they don't look too great. They're starting to suffer from the cold and the lack of sunlight. The nasturtiums look fantastic, however. That's a volunteer that just came up out of nowhere. But the beans are going to be on their way out, and we are getting some still. There are a couple under there, but as I expected for a fall crop of beans, it's not going to be very prolific, but that's okay. We did get some. And it was a worthwhile endeavor. The beans helped to fix nitrogen into the soil for us, and I think that's making the next crop very happy. But yeah, we're going to be doing a partial reset of this one soon, taking out the beans. I've been talking about getting lettuce and chard in here, and in between the broccoli and celery, I'm thinking some onions. Some onions would be cool. But yeah, and here's the native area. Not too pleased with the distribution of the grass and wildflower seeds that came up, but that's okay. We can reseed them. We have a bunch of rain on the way, so that offers the perfect opportunity to seed in some more wildflowers and grasses. But the ones that did germinate are doing absolutely fantastic. I see a lot of Gielias in here, some poppies, lots of Clarkias, and of course there are a couple lupines and even 1 native sunflower. So that's super cool. Plenty of grasses as well, and the natives that we did sow, direct sow. Here's our cobweb thistle and the gum plant. They look good. All the perennials look like they're getting established as well, which is fantastic. I think I did see some deerweed in here somewhere, because these ones were supposed to be deerweed, but I don't see it right now. It's around here. Ah, yes, there it is. That's the deerweed, native shrub. So we're going to, the deerweed is going to pretty much be a support species for the other native plants to help them get established, to fix nitrogen, and get this whole area going, pretty much. So yeah, we'll resow this. I would say probably, I might need to come in on Monday and do that right before the rains come, because we definitely want to do it right before the rains. Anyways, the rest of the garden looks good. Just really briefly, I want to cover what's going on. So this is from last week's live, or the previous live, I believe. Yeah. Previous live, because we did not do a live last week. We had something going on. So the peas look amazing. Not so sure about the cauliflower and spinach, but that's okay. We'll replant. I think we're going to put some celery here. But the peas look incredible. They always do. Yeah, so this bed right here, we just reset this one. This was last week, and so we got a bunch of purple cabbage and Romanesco in there, as well as some parsley, and we did sow in some peas. They have not germinated yet, but they are on their way. And in addition, right here, in the very edge of the bed, we put in some green manure rows, and essentially on these edges right here, we're going to be growing our own fertilizer for this bed. We have plants that are very good at accumulating nutrients, fixing nitrogen, and then we're going to cut those plants down and lay them on the mulch row in the center, and they will feed the rest of the plants. That's the whole idea. This is a self-feeding bed here. We started it with a little bit of fertilizer initially, ran some cover crops, and now it's in full swing pretty much, and we just need to keep this netting up and find a long-term solution to keep the possums out of this bed, because they love to dig around. We have holes all over the garden, and I can show you guys what the possum holes look like. But our friend in the center, Julie, was able to catch a picture of this culprit, and they dig these really deep holes looking for grubs. They're pretty deep, and they just tear everything to shreds. So we need to find a way to keep them out, because they're going to keep doing damage. I've been trying various solutions. So chili powder does not seem to be very effective. Have been trying various preparations from animal blood. Again, limited effectiveness. Even tried coyote urine. That seems to be more effective. The one that really seems to help is garlic powder. We need to get our hands on some more garlic powder. But aside from that, pretty much just trying to use very aromatic leaves from some of the plants around here. We did prune the lime tree for the winter recently, and they were going through this mushroom bed right here and tearing it up, and I just mulched with these lime prunings, and it seems to be helping over here, but not so much over here. They have still been getting into this bed, and what you hear right there are the noisemakers, and the noisemakers do nothing. So hardest pest to deal with is by far mammals. And like in an ideal situation, you want to trap them and get them out of here. But there are so many mammals on campus that it's just not feasible, and we just have to find a way to keep them away. Another thing that works very well is these cages. And thank you, Dr. Biznelian. So these cages will keep them out, but it's really impractical to use them on larger beds, especially when you have big perennials growing. So hard to do. You can also use netting. This netting works well if you're doing a, which is what we're doing here. It will keep them out, but a lot of vegetables won't be able to grow through the netting. So yeah, that's sort of an overview of what we've been doing. Everything's looking great, ready to go into winter and get our winter crops. But right now, today, we are going to talk about our systems. So we are going to be working on our aquaponics system, our research hydroponic system, the tower garden hydroponic system. These two are run off of synthetic nutrients, so chemical fertilizers. And then our organic hydroponic systems over here. We'll be talking about what fertilizers we use and why, how to maintain water chemistry, why it's important to maintain the water chemistry within certain parameters. And the organic systems are, of course, doing the best. They're always doing the best. I mean, just look at this beautiful mugwort, this beautiful Minutina. This is a crop that we're trialing here that I've grown in the past. This is a perennial leafy green. Recently got some kale in. Kale looks fantastic. Kale from, I believe this one was from Steve List, so thank you, Mr. List. Great friend of ours. And of course we have our seedling table right here, and Daniela helped me plant these out last Wednesday, and they are already germinating. Look at that. So we're gonna have an entire tray of lettuce to work with. We're gonna have a lot more brassicas, so we have some kale in here, we even have some chard, and we're trialing another crop called mache. And then we have some kohlrabi and some walking stick kale. Those are my seeds. I brought them. I wanted to plant the rest of them. So yeah, looking very good. Looking very good overall. And we're going to get to maintaining these systems. All right, let's set things up. Yeah, let's start with the organic system. All right, so these towers are called ZipGrow towers. And I could explain briefly how they work. We have planted these before on the live, so if you look back in past lives, you can see how to plant these out. But we're not going to be doing any planting today. Our seedlings are not quite ready. And that tower on the very right, looks like we're going to plant it with lettuce, because we're going to have so much lettuce to work with. But as far as these towers go, mostly smaller plants. The mugwort's pretty much as big as you want to go, and you want to keep the mugwort heavily pruned. And we also have some dill in here that we put in last week. The dill looks pretty good. But yeah, so basically how these towers work is you have these two plastic sponges. I guess you can call them sponges, you know, but I like to call them media because it is a growing medium. And they slide in from the top and they fold shut like a book. So you sandwich the plants inside, you fold them shut, and you have this felt strip in here to make sure that the water is evenly distributed across the root zones, and then they're irrigated from the top. As you can see right here. Looks like the pump is clogged, so we're going to need to fix that. Or the emitters are clogged. So that's actually perfect timing. I can show you guys how to unclog emitters. So yeah, and I wanted you guys to get on the water test because you guys know how to do that. So let's start taking some water samples. I'm going to kill the power right here. So the first thing that we want to do before we perform maintenance on a system that requires any sort of water testing is make sure that the power is not going to be an issue. In this particular system, if we remove a tower, then the water is going to start to leak out because there's no other way to get the water aside from removing a tower. The water will begin to stream out of the emitters and be lost from the system. So, when we are doing maintenance on a system, the first thing that we want to do is check the water level. So, when you guys want to check the water level and tell me how high it is? Let's see.
It's about full.
About full?
It looks about full. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like right there.
That is full. And there is some debris in here. We want to clean the debris out. These big tepu trees here love to drop seed pods and leaves all over the garden. While on the mulch, that is a good thing. We do not want that in our systems necessarily. In an organic system, it's kind of okay, but you don't want that in a synthetic system, so with synthetic nutrients. So yeah, the water level is full. And then what do we want to test? Two things for hydroponics. pH. And what do we test the probe? Conductivity. So we want to test pH and conductivity in hydroponics. So pH is a measure of the acidity or alkalinity of the nutrient solution, which is water-based. And so we want to keep the pH within a certain range in order to optimize the availability of nutrients. That is the accessibility of the nutrients to the plants. We can test the pH using a liquid solution. It's the easiest way to do it. You can also get digital probes, but they are a bit difficult to maintain. You have to be really on top of maintaining them. So that's not something I would recommend for beginners. I would just say use the liquid tests. So when we're growing leafy greens in hydroponics, we want to keep the pH at around 6 or slightly below that. So let's test it. We did fill this system up last week, so let's see how we're doing. I can tell, just by how the plants look, that there might be some kind of an imbalance in the system. We are getting, this could just be from water droplets, but we are getting some nutrient deficiency symptoms. So you can go ahead and test it, Daniela. And Daniela is going to demonstrate how to test the water. So we want to withdraw 5 milliliters of nutrient solution in a test tube or vial, and then add the directed amount of drops of our pH indicator solution, which is a solution that changes color in accordance to the pH, into the vial. And then we can use a color chart to read the pH. So this solution requires 3 drops, and there is a color chart on the bottle. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. That's fine. Okay. So then we want to cap it off. Look at that. I called it. So what does that say? We use the color chart.
7, 8?
Yeah, it's between 7 and 8, and that is too high for hydroponics. We're going to start getting phosphorus lockout, which is exactly what we're seeing. This right here, with the discoloration of the entire plant and a sort of like purpling of the dill leaves right here, that's phosphorus. So we have solved the issue, and if we have found the issue, now we can solve it without having to add any more nutrients to the water. All we have to do now is just adjust the pH, and that's it. Additionally, we want to test the conductivity to get the total amount of dissolved nutrients in the water. So would you like to do that, Nelly?
Sure. Do it.
Let's see what setting it's on. Can you turn that on? So it is on EC. I like to use the EC setting personally, which is electrical conductivity, but you can also use TDS and TDS, which is total dissolved solids. They're just different measurements. I'm used to using EC, but whichever one you want to use is your preference. So now all we have to do is dip the meter in the water and then read the result. Let's see.
1.9.
1.9. So we're shooting for 1.7 to 2.0. That's perfect. So our EC, that is the total amount of nutrients dissolved in the nutrient solution, is okay. But the pH is too high. And that's why we're beginning to experience these nutrient deficiency symptoms. So in order to correct the problem, we need to reduce the pH and then check back to see if it improves. If the problem is not improved, we may want to consider doing a water change. and getting some fresh nutrient solution in there to make sure that all the nutrients are in balance. Because in hydroponics, you can have a nutrient imbalance that is just the result of the nutrient solution being old, salts accumulating in the nutrient solution, and beginning to cause problems. This tends to be more of a problem when you're using synthetic nutrients and not doing it very precisely than it is in organic hydroponics. I haven't really had to do many water changes in organic hydroponics as frequently, but it is something that you should do. Aquaponics requires no water changes, and we'll talk about why after we're done here. But what we need to do now is we need to adjust the pH, and that is something I will do. So right here, we have 30% phosphoric acid. Here we use 30%, but I sometimes like to use 85%. If you are just starting out, I would recommend using 30%. There are also these pH down products on the market, and these oftentimes contain a bunch of other additives. They're okay if you're running synthetic nutrients, but not organic nutrients, because some of those additives, like citric acid, for example, have antimicrobial properties, and an organic hydroponic system such as this one is dependent on microbes to metabolize the fertilizers into plant available nutrients. So I'm going to get some gloves on, safety first, and a little bit goes a long way, and make sure that you guys can see. We're just going to add it right there. So I'm just going to add a small amount of the acid. Just mix it around. And since this system has air bubblers in it, because in organic hydroponics we want to maintain adequate oxygenation, and the way we do that is with air bubblers. So it will mix around, and we can check the pH again. I'm gonna add a little bit more. We can check the pH again in a couple hours and see where it's gone to, and then I would say check it again in a couple days, because an organic hydroponic system has a complex microbiome, and if you make one change to the pH, it could cause another feedback that changes it even more. So you just want to be on top of it and continue monitoring it to see if you need to readjust it. But anyways, this system, the water has been adjusted, so and then I will demonstrate how to unclog the emitters. Do you guys have any questions? Is it all making sense? Hydroponics is fairly simple, aquaponics is not. So we'll get into aquaponics. And we're doing fantastic on time. So now, in order to unclog these emitters, well, first I need to ascertain that they are clogged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these, like so. These are compression fittings. So basically, they get locked in by this collar, and you have to press down on the collar and then pull them out to remove them. And so this is the gross part that not everybody likes to do, but I don't care. Yeah, see that? That's our problem. All those seed pods and leaves falling into the system, getting broken down inside of the system, and then the debris clogging the emitters. So that one's clean. And that one's clean. So then I will replace this, like so, and put it back on. And we're going to do this for all of them. You can use a stream of pressurized water if you don't want to use your breath. I find that using your breath is less messy and more convenient. And these are a bit difficult to remove, but we will disassemble these. I will demonstrate how to do that. You guys can try one each as well. It's a bit difficult, but so just kind of, you see the collar here, you want to press down on it like so and pull it out. There you go, and I can see that this one has a little bit in it, so let's see this one. Yep, there we go. Gross. All clean. Hydroponics and aquaponics can be a dirty job. I feel like it should be featured on that show. Anyways, I'm not going to make you guys unclog it like that. You guys can just disassemble it. I'm the one who's been doing this for almost 5 years. I can do it. do. Thank you, Nelly. You guys want to try disassembling? I'm going to back this up so you guys can be on camera. Attempt to disassemble this right here. Yeah, you gotta push in that collar and then pull the pipe out. There you go, that's it.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
All right.
It's a weird
Yeah.
fitting, but oftentimes these kinds of fittings are used for like water filtration systems. You want to give it a shot, Daniela? And then I can unclog this. Well, that was a big one.
Oh.
To be expected when you have a lot of litter falling into the system. But they're really easy to reassemble. Like I can show you, pretty much just like pop it right back in. And that's that. So
It doesn't look too clogged.
it may not be. That may I think that's the one from the end, which was still emitting water. Yeah, that one's good. Pop it back in. And that's it. The system's emitters have been unclogged. But we still need to check the pump. And I am not going to do that really on camera. That's not something you can easily do on camera, but I will talk about it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask at any time. I think I'm going to take off my sweatshirt to do this, actually. I don't want to get my sleeves all wet and get them stinky and musty.
Yeah.
All right. So, first of all, know where your pump is. Pump is right down there. You can see that it's probably right down there because we have the delivery tube running up there. So, remove this like so. Just kind of have to like bring them up and then out. Just leave that right there. These kale plants do look pretty good. And I think that this issue right here will now be corrected. If not, then we'll reassess. So I'm gonna go in here. Water's very cold. And I'm feeling the inside of the pump, and I can feel that it is not clogged. So if it was clogged, I might have to remove the pump and then purge it out like I did so the emitters. So now, we can replace this. This system has now been serviced. We checked the pH, we adjusted the pH, we checked the EC, the nutrients, and decided that there was no need to adjust it. And now we can turn the power back on. So I will do that. You guys can hear the air pumps running?
There's that one on there.
Oh yeah, there we go. There's an issue right there. That's why it's always important to check. So in this case, we just need to move the emitter because it's just splashing, that's all it is. So we just need to move it back in place. And now we'll check all of them to make sure they're emitting water. Yep, we're good there. I'll get that in frame. Good there. Good there. This one's a bit slow, but that's okay. This is an adequate flow rate. That one, of course. And then this one. Yep, we're all good. So now this system is good to go. Simple as that. Let's check this one. So this one is really cool. One of the things about hydroponics is that you can use it to very easily start your seeds. So, as I mentioned, we did start these seeds last week and they're already germinating. The really cool thing about this type of system, this is called an ebb and flow system, is that you can use it to automatically water your seedlings. So we have this system on a timer. It is set to flood twice per day, like so. I'm going to override the timer and demonstrate how it works. there we are. Twice per day, it's going to flood. And the water from the system, the nutrient solution, is going to contact the bottom of these containers. It's going to contact the bottom, and then through capillary action, the water is going to be pulled up to the top to evenly water the containers. And this works with containers that are as tall as about 4 inches. Any taller than that and you'll begin to experience issues. But we're going to allow it to flood to ensure that the water level is adequate. We usually want 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of water. Too tall and the pots will become oversaturated, too little and they won't get watered adequately. So, while we're waiting for that to happen, why don't you guys test the water? Seedlings, we want to be, a seedling table, we want to be around 5.7. We can't measure that precisely with our test solution that we have. However, we can get it close, yes, from down there. And we can see the air pumps running down there because this is also an organic hydroponic system. This is the air pump right here. This is our air pump that is providing oxygenation to this system right here and that system. We want to keep the water constantly aerated and agitated to provide an aerobic, that is oxygen-rich environment for the microbes that convert the organic nutrients that we add to a plant-available form. So Daniela is over here testing the water, the pH.
Got it.
All right, cool, cool. And you just gotta give it a little shake. Ooh, what do we have here? Looks to be too high, yeah?
Yeah.
Probably right about 8. That's way too high, especially for seedlings. We can't have that. And granted, the seedlings look pretty good despite that, but some of these are like these ones, are planted in a regular seed starting mix that has fertilizer added. So in this case, the pH is not going to affect them as much. And we can see they still look pretty healthy. But most of the seedlings in here are planted in an inert hydroponic media that is mostly devoid of nutrients. And this is just a mix of coconut coir and vermiculite. We did add a little bit of worm castings and some azomite rock dust to provide a small amount of nutrients, but it's not enough nutrients to make them not dependent on the system's nutrient solution. So we need to make sure that the pH is correct. So I'm going to add some more phosphoric acid to this. And that's that. The next thing that we're going to want to do here is ensure that it's not clogged. So if we go around to this side, I'm going to move these out of the way. Do you mind bringing the camera over, Nelly? This is the return line right here. This is the inlet for the return line, which returns the water back to the tank because the water continues to recirculate. So we just want to pull all this debris out so that it doesn't get clogged. Just remove it. You won't be able to get all of it, but that's okay. Water is very cold. All these cool season crops are loving that cold water. They are germinating very well too. I think we're going to get good germination this time. But yes, anyways, even the mushrooms are starting to germinate soon. And that's going to be, that one's supposed to be tough to germinate. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. So, yes, so it looks like we have about 1/4 inch of water, which is perfect. That's why we're getting perfect watering. So, now that we know that, we can turn off the timer. It will now turn on automatically. So we turn off the timer, and now all this water as you can see right here, is going to begin returning to our tank, our reservoir, which holds the nutrient solution. Again, it's just water and some fertilizers, organic fertilizers. And when it's time, it will flood the table. And now our seedlings are watered and fertilized without us having to do anything. And yes, you can transplant these into soil. They do take a little bit longer to get adjusted to soil because coming from hydroponics, but they will get adjusted to soil just fine. In fact, all those plants that we have in the new bed right there that we prepared last week came from this table. Some of them were seedlings that we got from Mr. List. Other ones we germinated in this table, and they're doing just fine. So, yeah, you can use this to start seedlings for any of your plants. Also, we need to test the EC. So, let's do that. You haven't done it yet, Daniela. Do you want to do it? All right, so Daniela is going to test the EC. Again, feel free to ask questions at any point. This is our EC, our electrical conductivity. That is a measurement of total nutrient concentrations. What are we looking at?
How long did I put it?
That's just an instant, and it looks like 1.1. 1.1 is what we want for seedlings. For seedlings, we want 1.0 to 1.4. So, it's perfect. So, provided the pH is now within range, this system is now perfectly healthy. Now, we don't need to add any fertilizers to any of these systems. So, but let's talk about what we do add. So for an organic hydroponic system, I prefer to use mostly liquid nutrients and anything that is soluble. You won't really find a lot of soluble organic fertilizers, and this is actually not what we use. I'll get what we do use. So in a hydroponic system, instead of soil that contains nutrients and that cycles nutrients and that makes them available to plants, what we have is a water-based solution that contains these nutrients. And these nutrients are either water soluble, they will dissolve directly in the water. This is the case with most synthetic nutrients and some organic nutrients, such as this, or soluble seaweed powder. And in the case of an organic hydroponic system, there will be microbes living on the growing medium that break down these nutrients and make them available, as is the case with many of the nutrients in this fish mold. Same fertilization principles apply. You want NPK and micronutrients. So, for our N, we like to use fish emulsion. You can see 511, that is very high in nitrogen. To add some P, some phosphorus, I have been using this fish and seaweed fertilizer because most of our leafy greens don't need that much phosphorus. So it is higher in phosphorus, and I will mix 4 parts this, 2 parts this, and then 1 part of our soluble seaweed powder to get tons of potassium, because leafy greens do like potassium. Now you want to be careful with this one because it also is high in salt, so don't add too much. You can get some salt burn issues and you'll have to change out your water, but this is very high in potassium. So 4 parts this, 2 parts that, 1 part that. If you're measuring teaspoons, for every 2 gallons of water, 4 teaspoons of this, 2 teaspoons of that, and 1 teaspoon of this. You could probably even go a bit less on this. This stuff is very potent. So that's the organic hydroponic fertilizer mix that we use here. In addition, we might add an additional 1 part of azomite rock dust, which contains a broad spectrum of micronutrients, because micronutrients might be limiting in some of these fertilizers. But generally, if you follow this recipe, it's great for leafy greens, and you'll do it right. And then, of course, we use the phosphoric acid to adjust the pH. All right, so I want to cover aquaponics next, because that's going to take a while. And if we have time, we'll cover how to work with synthetic fertilizers. I don't like working with synthetic fertilizers personally. I've worked with synthetic fertilizers for 4.5 years now in hydroponics, and they work well. But think about where they come from. They either come from fossil fuels or they're mined, or made in a chemical plant, pretty much. So you either get like petroleum, and you use what's called the Haber-Bosch process to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere using the fossil fuel, using the the petroleum or the natural gas, not great for the environment, or they come from mined minerals that are then processed into these chemical forms, and also not great for the environment. But they do work, and they're probably the easiest place to start for a hydroponic grower, so don't feel too bad about using them if you're just learning. You could start with organic hydroponics too, but that requires a little bit more know-how. I find that organic hydroponics is easier when you know what you're doing, but starting out using the synthetic nutrients is definitely a little bit easier. So we'll talk about aquaponics now. And our aquaponics system is back in swing. Really excited about that. We have our kale in here. This is lacinato kale, and it looks wonderful. Looks absolutely wonderful. And of course we have our fishies. Got 3 goldfish and 1 tilapia in there right now. The lighter colored one is the tilapia. We will be adding a couple more fish as the plants grow. So, the thing that we need to do now is clean off our kit. And this is something that I'll demonstrate how to do. And how to do the test for aquaponics, because I've not shown either of you yet. I think I showed you and Ellie once, but I don't think I've shown you Daniel. So this is going to be the part that's pretty heady and will require a lot of explaining. So to clean out our test tubes, pH indicator solution is very safe and non-toxic. So we could just dump it out. It's not an environmental hazard at all. So whenever you're working with chemicals, you always want to know whether or not they're an environmental hazard. This stuff breaks down really rapidly and becomes inert, so don't even worry about it. So then, I'll just take the hose. I like to do at least 2 rinsings with tap water. If you want to be even more accurate, use deionized water, but I don't have deionized water. So, now we have 2 clean test tubes, and then we're going to get the rest of our kit in the gloves. Alright. So, in aquaponics, there's actually 4 things that we're testing for in the water. We don't really worry as much about EC in aquaponics. It's not too much of a concern. But what we are worrying about is what's called the nitrogen species. And the nitrogen species are a suite of nitrogen-containing compounds that are present in aquaponic systems. And depending on what the readings are, it can tell you about the health of the system's microbiome and how many nutrients are available. So I should probably explain how aquaponics actually works. So, you have a fish tank, right? And when you go to feed the fish are going to metabolize the food, and some of the nutrients are going to be excreted back out. Some of the nutrients, mostly the nitrogen, which is, again, one of the most important plant nutrients, is going to be excreted through the gills in the form of ammonia or ammonium, NH3 or NH4+, and which form it exists in depends on the water pH. At a lower pH, you have NH4+. At a higher pH, you have NH3. NH3 is toxic, NH4+ is relatively non-toxic. So those are the 2 forms of ammonia. Ammonia gas, NH3, and ammonium, NH4+. So then what happens is in this media, we have a very, very, very active colony of these microbes. And this media is called hydrogen. It is expanded clay. So what they do is they'll take this special kind of clay and put it inside of this rotary kiln, this gigantic drum that's heated, and they heat it up really hot and it puffs up like popcorn. You can see there's all these pores on it. And so on all these pore spaces, there's trillions of microorganisms living. And most of these microorganisms are what are called nitrifying bacteria. So they're called nitrifying bacteria. And there are 2 main kinds of nitrifying bacteria in aquaponics. There's Nitrosomonas, which are ammonia oxidizing bacteria, and Nitrobacter, which are nitrite oxidizing bacteria. So, when fish excrete ammonia into the system, it is just present in the water, and then these ammonia oxidizing bacteria will take that ammonia and convert it into nitrite. It's a NO2-, right? So, nitrite is very toxic to fish. It's poison. So then what happens is the nitrite oxidizing bacteria will come in and convert that into nitrate, NO3-, which is relatively non-toxic to fish, and this is our primary form of plant-available nitrogen in aquaponics, is nitrate. So what we want to see is no ammonia, no nitrite, and plenty of nitrate in our system. If we see that, we know that these bacteria are present and doing their job. If we do not see that, we know that something is wrong. So we're going to test that. And we're going to see how things are doing, and we'll interpret the results. And I've seen all kinds of results of these different parameters. And each different combination will tell you different things. And you kind of have to use your critical thinking skills. You got to use your noggin and infer what's going on based on your other observations about the system. Like, how are the fish doing? Do they look healthy? How are they eating? Is there lots of gunk in the system? Has it been cleaned recently? You know, what's the water temperature? What have been the trends in pH? Because if the pH is out of whack or has been all over the place, that could affect the nitrifying bacteria. That could affect the fish. Are you overfeeding? Are you underfeeding? Do you have enough fish? Do you have too many plants? You know, is there a balance in the system? Has the system been stable and balanced? That's really what you're asking here. And, you know, has the state of the system been fairly consistent? And if it is, you can then infer. You can see what's going on. And so this is why aquaponics is so hard, because you have to get a feel for that. You have to develop that skill of observing and interacting with and assessing the system. So now the bell siphon is draining. So this is a good chance for me to talk about the bell siphon. So this device right here is called a bell siphon. And what the bell siphon does is it causes all the water to evacuate from this media bed right here back down into the fish tank once the water height reaches a certain height. Then when the water gets to the bottom, air gets inside of the siphon and it resets. And I'll explain a bit more right now. So I'm going to deactivate the siphon, and all you got to do is pull out this bell tube. You just heard it gurgle, and that gurgling sound was air getting into the siphon. So we have this pipe in the center, right, called our standpipe. What the standpipe does is it sets the water height in the bed. When the water gets to the top of that standpipe, it'll begin flowing over the edges. And if this bell is on top, if the flow rate is high enough, it'll create a seal over the top. So the water will completely cover the top of this pipe. When that occurs, it creates a vacuum that sucks all the water down to the bottom into the fish tank. When the water gets to the bottom of the bell and air begins to get into these holes, the vacuum is broken and then the cycle restarts. The bed will fill up all over again, another seal will be made, and then the water will be sucked out again. And this happens over and over and over and over again. So we have constant water flow going into this bed, yet the water level is fluctuating thanks to this bell siphon device. So, now that that's out of the way, we'll test the water. So, I'm going to pull some water from the delivery line right here, which is just fed by the same kind of pump you would use in hydroponics or a pond. Just a submersible pump, nothing too fancy. And then we're going to test to see how our microbiome is doing, which mostly exists in this media. Once again, the microbes will exist, our nitrifying bacteria will exist in every single surface on the system that is in permanent contact with water. But most of that surface area is in the media, because you have so many pieces of media and therefore lots of surface area in the media bed. So again, we're going to fill up these test tubes, 5 ml. And I can have one of you guys test the pH and the EC, because we do monitor the EC here because we just don't want it too high in aquaponics. Because if it's too high, then we can have a salt issue. That's what that means. So I like to just flick the water until I get like that. And who wants to test the pH? Remember the pH, Nelly? So I'll demonstrate. We don't want to use that one. No, we want to use the other one. So for aquaponics, we want to be a little bit more precise. We want to get things accurate within 0.02 of the pH point. So we're going to use this. This pH indicator solution ranges from 6 to 7.4, roughly. And that'll give us, it has higher resolution, and therefore we'll get a more accurate reading.
3 drops?
Yep, 3 drops. It says add 3 on the bottom. And so I'm going to prepare the rest of these test tubes so we can test the nitrogen species. The forms of nitrogen that are in the system, chemical forms. So we just want 5 ml. Let me see while you're doing that, if we can find a color chart. to read that. That I can tell you right now that's 6.8, which is good. We want 6.6 to 6.8, or 6.4 to 6.8. Let me see if I can try and color it up. Here we go. And this is the API Freshwater Master Test Kit. Right there. It's right about 6.6 to 6.8, which is perfect. The water, the pH of the water is perfect, so that's what we want. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to do the nitrogen species test. Why don't you do the EC? So Daniela's going to do the EC and just stick it into the water. I'm going to get those gloves.
1.2.
1.2, that's fine. Let me get my gloves on because some of these chemicals for the nitrogen species tests are a bit nasty. So, but they're also not big environmental hazards at all. But these ones we definitely want to dispose of properly. Am I in frame? All right. So I like to do the nitrate test first. So for the nitrate test, what we have to do is first add 10 drops of this solution, part 1. Right, now that we have that, I'm just going to cap it, get it nice and well mixed, like so. Then, it's hard with these gloves, I have no dexterity. I'm going to add the number 2 solution. The number 2 solution is a suspension, so you want to shake it around really vigorously and homogenize it. Some of the crystals may have settled out and you want to, and coagulated, so you want to break them up. Just give it a nice shake. The kit, it says to do it for 30 seconds. Follow the instructions when you're starting out, but I find it doesn't matter that much. Get a feel of what works for you, always. So I think that's adequate. Remove this test tube, and do not get any of these chemicals into the system. Bad news. Aquaponic systems cannot handle contamination. I've had many experiences with contamination, and none of them are good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright. So, now what we're going to do is cap it and shake it vigorously. I like to hold it like this. This is the safe way to hold it. Shake it vigorously. Get all those little suspended crystals mixed around. And now we have to wait 5 minutes for this to develop. I'm just going to stick it right back there. And I can already see it starting to change color, so that means there is nitrate present in the system. That's what we want. Next, I'm going to do the ammonia test. Very similar procedure. This time, we just want to add 8 drops of part 1. I like to invert this one first, and then you don't have to mix this one around as vigorously. There's really no need in this case. And then part 2, 8 drops. And this is probably the nastiest chemical in the kit for the system. So do not get this one into the system. It even says on the back, toxic to aquatic organisms, so do not get it in the system. Thankfully, I've never had an incident with any of the test kit chemicals. I'm very careful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that one is ready, and also requires 5 minutes to develop. Alright, now place that right there and allow that to develop. Then we have one more test. Nitrite, and this one is just 1 bottle, 5 drops, and that's it. And 5 minutes to develop. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's it. Give it a little shake. It's inverting. And now we wait. So, while we are waiting, I'm going to demonstrate how to properly top off and adjust the pH of an aquaponics system. So in hydroponics, you can just add your acid in willy-nilly. You don't really have to worry about it that much. However, in aquaponics, think about it this way. An aquaponics system is an ecosystem. It is a complex ecosystem that has all these players. And many of these players are sensitive to changes, sudden changes in pH. The nitrifying bacteria are, and especially the fish are. The fish are the weakest link in any aquaponics system. So, any complex system like aquaponics cannot tolerate very acute stressors and chronic stressors. If we change the pH by 1 whole point, for example, that's a very acute stress. Think of it this way. From a pH level of 7 to 6, a pH of 6 is 10 times more acidic than a pH of 7. So you're changing the water chemistry by an entire order of magnitude when you do that. So we want to keep the water change, the change of the pH in aquaponics, at 0.2 per day or less, 0.2 of a pH point. So we have to be very, very careful about how much acid we have. So I'm going to set this aside. And here's how I like to do it. So first of all, let's get a bucket. There is debris in this bucket, so we're going to clean it up. Let's give it a nice little swish. And this can feed plants. Then, I like to take this bucket and fill it up with water. Because another thing that you do not want to do is add acid directly to the system. If a fish comes into contact with that acid before it has the chance to fully dissolve, that fish now has a gill injury. And when a fish gets injured like that, gets a serious injury like that, it'll get sick later on and possibly die. So then what I will do is add the desired amount of acid to the bucket as it is filling up. And as the hose is filling up the water in the bucket, it is mixing the water around and thereby dissolving the acid. So now we have diluted it.
How do you know how much to add?
How do I know how much to add? You have to get a feel for it. This is a skill that you have to develop over time. And the best way to practice it is to get a bucket of tap water, fill it all the way up, and then just practice adding acid to it until you get the pH that you want. Set a pH target for yourself, and then just practice at getting that target, and you'll get a feel for how long to squeeze the bottle, pretty much. That's it. Because the issue is, since our water has lots of minerals in it, it's alkaline, it's really difficult to know exactly how much you have to add. Because, you know, what you're dealing with is called a buffer system in the water. I'm sure you guys have heard of buffer system in chemistry. So, for viewers, a buffer system is basically a chemical complex in the water that resists changes in pH. And so it's really hard to calculate how much acid a buffer system is able to absorb before the pH actually changes permanently. So, therefore, you just have to get a feel for it. Unless you have expensive equipment or want to do all these tests on your tap water. And it's like, not even worth it, because the hardness of your tap water can fluctuate depending on where your city is getting the water from at the time of year, and depending on your location. There are so many variables that affect how strong the buffer system is in your water. So in my opinion, it's just not worth it, and you just want to develop a feel for how much acid you should add. So now that our acid is fully mixed in and dissolved, I'm just going to pour it in. Just pour in the water. And so now you're adding your acid, your pH reducing agent, in a very diluted form so it will not injure your fish. So whenever you top off the system with tap water, you want to know what the pH of your tap water is. I know that the pH of the tap water here is around 8. So therefore, whenever I add water to the system, I also have to add acid to bring it down to a level that is acceptable for the system. My goal is to have the average pH of the water that I'm adding be at around 6.6. Roughly speaking. Maybe you want to even shoot for a little bit lower, because the buffer system in the tap water will eat up some of that acid. So you want to consider that. So after I've added the desired amount of acid diluted in the water, just straight tap water. When it comes to adding water, always, 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 always use dechlorinated water. Never use water with chlorine in it. Ever. Easiest way to crash your aquaponics system. Do not do it. I have done it. I have killed so many fish that way. Do not do it. So, and in fact, I think we need to replace the chlorine filter we have on our hose, because it's old. And we're going to start seeing those kinds of problems. Speaking of, let's take a look at our water tests. So again, pH. Perfect, we're within range. 6.6 to 6.8. That's exactly what we want. Nitrate. We're between 40 and 80. That's exactly what we want for leafy greens. 40 to 80 parts per million. Nitrate. We're at 0, which is exactly what we want. And ammonia. We are at 0.5, which is not what we want. That's too high. We want 0. So now we need to think about, why are our ammonia levels elevated? And Nellie and Danielle, can you think of any reason why ammonia levels will be elevated? Think about where the ammonia comes from in the system, the fish. The fish and fish food. Why would it be too high? What would cause this? Because the bacteria convert the ammonia, but the fish produce it.
Maybe their waste?
Their waste? So too much waste production. So the fish are producing waste faster than the bacteria can consume it. That could be possible. It may not be just that, though. It could be that there is also debris in the system that is producing ammonia. So we just cleaned the system, and when I did, a bunch of debris was dislodged from the system, right? So that can cause it to begin to convert and decompose and produce ammonia. So could be overfeeding, could be the debris, could be an issue with the nitrifying bacteria, but most likely not, because we are seeing the nitrite turn into, the ammonia turn into nitrite, and we are seeing the nitrite turn into nitrate. So most likely the microbiome is fine. You know, could be some issue, because usually the bacteria that convert over ammonia to nitrite are more sensitive than the ones that convert nitrite over to nitrate. So we could have some issue with the biology, and this is why I'm saying, hey, we may need to change over that chlorine filter because they may be getting affected. The fish look fine, but if there's a chlorine problem, they might not start showing symptoms until they're almost dead. So, could be a chlorine problem. Additionally, our test kit could just fail. I know in the past that from this test kit that the ammonia test starts to become very inaccurate when the reagents are old. And we've had this test kit for like a year. So I'm thinking it just might be the kit too. We need to get a new kit for sure. But it's hard to say right now. So the best thing we can do for our plan of action is 1, to watch our feeding, 2, replace the chlorine filter, and 3, consider getting a new kit soon. Other than that, the system looks fine. The fish are healthy, the plants are healthy, and we can test if the fish are stressed out. You know, and there's one way to test that, and that is to feed them. Oh shoot. Wow, would you look at that? Our possum trying to even move the feeder. He's trying to get the feeder. So, but the fish have been fed. We'll see if they go for it. And fish do not eat when they are stressed. Consider what could be causing your fish's stress. So, it could be an imbalance in the water or some kind of contaminant such as chlorine. Or it could just be because they only were introduced to the system about 2 weeks ago. Oh, they're eating it. They're eating it. Look at that. They're eating it. They're right there. They're eating it. Or they were. And they are still a bit shy, but they are eating it. And they seem to be eating it pretty eagerly. Look at them go. There they go. They seem pretty happy about that food. So the fish are not stressed. At least not very stressed. So, maybe it's not a chlorine problem. Maybe we can infer from that, hey, the fish are fine. Or they're mostly fine. Could be a little chlorine problem, but since the fish tend to be more sensitive to chlorine than the nitrifying bacteria, it's probably not that. So, it's either too much debris in the system, overfeeding, or just the reagent's old. We need to get a new kit. So that's how you troubleshoot and assess and use your critical thinking skills. Use your noggin to figure out what's going on in your system. And this is something you constantly have to do in aquaponics. Granted, this is why it's difficult, but granted, when you're able to get a system balanced out and stable, they're very stable as long as you don't screw it up. As long as you don't introduce something that causes a problem or do something that causes a problem. You can neglect your system. You can go out there once a day to feed the fish and that's it. As long as you know how much you need to feed, you're good. And the rule for that is feed them as much as they will eat in 10 minutes. That's the rule. So, that's how you maintain an aquaponics system. Test the water, make sure to follow proper topping off procedures, and analyze the results of the test and assess the health of your fish by test feeding them. We call it test feeding. Anyways, I think I overfilled the system, but that's okay. It's fine. So yeah, let's see what time it is. It's 11:04. So we made time and then some. So thank you for joining us today, Daniela and Anelli, as always. And we're going to see you guys next time. Looks like we're not doing a live next week because of the rain. We're going to get a lot of rain. Really excited for that. And then after that's winter break. So no lives over winter break. So we will see you guys after the new year. Happy New Year's, everybody. Happy holidays.
See you next year.
See you all next year. Happy 2022. Have a good one.